The cold water had soaked through her thin dress hours ago. Clara Winters sat on the muddy hill and stared at what used to be her village. The flood had taken everything. Houses, shops, the small church where her mother was buried, all gone beneath the brown water that still rushed through the valley. Her hands were scraped and bleeding from climbing to safety. Her hair hung in wet tangles down her back. She had nothing left, not even shoes. The water had pulled them from her feet as she ran. Other survivors huddled nearby in small groups. Some cried, some just stared like Clara did. The rescue workers moved among them with blankets and bread. But Clara could not move. She kept seeing the moment when the wall of water crashed through the village. She kept hearing the screams. Her aunt and uncle had not made it out. Their cottage had been closest to the river. Clara had been visiting the baker when the flood came. That accident of timing had saved her life. A woman in a grey cloak stopped beside her. "You must eat something, child." The woman held out a piece of bread. Clara took it, but did not eat. Her stomach felt hollow, but her throat was too tight. "What is your name?" the woman asked gently. Clara opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came out. The woman patted her shoulder and moved on. Clara was 23 years old and completely alone in the world. The days after the flood blurred together. Clara stayed in a tent with 12 other women who had lost their homes. They were given thin blankets and watery soup twice a day. The ground was still wet and cold seeped through everything. At night, Clara lay awake and listened to the other women cry. She could not cry herself. The grief felt too big to fit through tears. During the day, she helped sort through donated clothes and tried to make herself useful, but she felt like a ghost moving through the world. The other women whispered about what would happen to them. Most had relatives in other villages who would take them in eventually. Clara had no one. Her parents had died of fever when she was 16. Her aunt and uncle had taken her in, but made her work hard for her keep. They had told her often that she was plain and difficult, that no man would want to marry her, that she should be grateful they fed her at all. Clara had believed them. Now they were gone, and she did not know if she was sad or relieved. The guilt of that thought made her chest ache. On the 5th day after the flood, a fine carriage arrived at the camp. Clara watched from her place by the supply tent as a tall man in a black coat stepped down. He moved like someone carrying a great weight. His shoulders were straight, but his face looked tired. The camp organizer rushed forward to greet him. "Lord Ashworth, such kindness, my lord. We did not expect you to come yourself." The man looked around at the muddy camp and the tired faces. "How many have lost everything?" he asked. His voice was deep and quiet. The organizer consulted his papers. 43 souls, my lord. Most will go to family and time, but some have nowhere." Lord Ashworth nodded slowly. "I will take 10 to my estate. They can work in the house or on the grounds. Food and shelter in exchange for honest work." The organizer looked relieved. "Most generous, my lord. Most generous indeed." Clara did not think she would be chosen. She had no skills that a great house would need. She could cook simple meals and clean well enough. But so could everyone. Still, when the organizer called her name, she stepped forward with 9 others. Lord Ashworth looked at each of them briefly. His eyes were grey like storm clouds. When his gaze reached Clara, it paused for just a moment. She saw something flicker in his expression. Sadness, maybe, or recognition of shared pain. Then he looked away. "The carriage will take you to Ashworth Manor," he said. "Mrs. Henshaw, my housekeeper, will arrange your positions." He climbed back into his carriage without another word. The ride to Ashworth Manor took 2 hours. Clara sat squeezed between 2 other women on the hard bench. They chattered nervously about their good fortune. Clara said nothing. She watched the countryside pass by the window. Green hills rolled on forever. Sheep grazed in distant fields. It all looked so peaceful, like the flood had never happened, like her entire world had not washed away in a single morning. The contrast made her feel strange and disconnected. Ashworth Manor rose up against the sky like something from a dream. Grey stone walls stretched in both directions. Windows gleamed in the afternoon sun. Gardens spread out in neat patterns around the house. Clara had never seen anything so grand. The carriage stopped at the servants' entrance at the side of the house. A stern woman in a black dress waited for them. "I am Mrs. Henshaw," she announced. "You will work hard here. You will be respectful and quiet. In return, you will have a warm bed and good food. Do you understand?" They all nodded. Mrs. Henshaw looked them over with sharp eyes. She assigned 8 to various positions: scullery maids, laundry workers, 1 boy to help in the stables. Finally, only Clara and 1 older woman remained. "You," Mrs. Henshaw said, pointing at Clara. "Can you read?" Clara nodded. "I can read and write, ma'am, and do numbers." Mrs. Henshaw's eyebrows rose slightly. "Indeed? Where did you learn?" Clara kept her voice steady. "My mother taught me. She had been a governess before she married." Mrs. Henshaw studied her for a long moment. "Very well. I need someone to help catalogue and organize the library. The last girl we had for it ran off to get married. The room has been neglected for months. Can you manage that?" Clara felt a small spark of something in her chest. Not quite hope, but close. "Yes, ma'am. I would be grateful for the chance." Mrs. Henshaw nodded. "You will also help with mending and light cleaning. Your room is on the 3rd floor. Martha here will show you up. You start tomorrow at 6. The room Clara was given was small but clean. A narrow bed stood against one wall. A washstand with a chipped basin occupied the corner. One window looked out over the gardens. After sleeping on cold ground for days, it felt like luxury. Martha, the older woman, had been assigned to the kitchens. She smiled kindly at Clara. "Seems we landed well, dear. This is a good house, from what I hear. The master keeps to himself mostly, still in mourning for his wife and son." Clara felt her chest tighten. "They died?" Martha nodded sadly. "Fever took them last winter, both gone within a week. The master has barely left the estate since. Such a tragedy." That night, Clara lay in her new bed and stared at the ceiling. She thought about Lord Ashworth's sad eyes, about how he had looked at the flood survivors with understanding rather than pity. He knew what it was to lose everything too. Maybe that was why he had offered help when others only offered prayers. Outside her window, an owl called in the darkness. Clara closed her eyes and felt tears finally come. They slid down her temples into her hair. She cried silently for her aunt and uncle, for her village, for the life she had known, and for the grieving man in his grand house, who was just as alone as she was. The library at Ashworth Manor was beautiful and neglected in equal measure. Tall windows let in streams of dusty sunlight. Shelves lined every wall from floor to ceiling. Books were piled on tables and stacked on chairs. Some had fallen to the floor and lay open with their pages bent. Clara stood in the doorway and felt overwhelmed. Mrs. Henshaw had not exaggerated. This would take weeks to sort properly. But as Clara stepped inside and breathed in the smell of old paper and leather, she felt something ease in her chest. Here was a task she could understand. Here was order waiting to be restored. She started by simply picking up what had fallen. Gently she straightened bent pages and closed covers. She made stacks by size at first, just to clear floor space. The work was soothing. Each book she touched was a small piece of knowledge, saved, a story preserved. By midday, She had cleared one corner of the room. Her back ached, but her mind felt clearer than it had in days. She did not think about the flood while she worked. She thought only about where each book belonged. At noon, a young maid brought her bread, cheese, and tea on a tray. "Mrs. Henshaw says you are to eat here, so you do not lose time," the girl explained. Clara thanked her and ate quickly. The food was simple but filling, better than anything she had eaten in the camp. When she finished, she returned to work. She found a ledger on one of the tables. Someone had started cataloguing the collection years ago, but had given up after only 3 pages. Clara decided to continue where they had left off. She wrote in careful letters, recording each title and author. The afternoon passed in focused silence. Clara moved between shelves, searching for books that matched the categories already started in the ledger: literature, history, philosophy, natural science. She made new categories when needed: poetry, travel, agriculture. The collection was impressive. Whoever had built it had cared about knowledge and beauty both. Some books had elegant gold lettering on their spines. Others were plain but well made. Clara handled each one with respect. She did not hear the door open behind her. Did not know anyone had entered until a voice said, "I see you are making progress." Clara spun around, nearly dropping the book in her hands. Lord Ashworth stood just inside the room. He wore black again, as was proper for mourning. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as though he had been running his hands through it. Up close, she could see he was younger than she had first thought. Perhaps 35. Handsome in a tired, drawn way. His grey eyes studied the organized corner she had created. Clara remembered to curtsy, nearly losing her balance in the process. "My lord, forgive me, I did not hear you enter." He waved away her apology with one hand. "You were focused on your task. That is good." He walked slowly along the shelves, his fingers trailing over the spines of books. "This was my wife's favorite room. She spent hours here reading. I have not been able to—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "I have not entered this room since her death." Clara did not know what to say. Her heart ached for his obvious pain. "The collection is beautiful, my lord," she offered quietly. "Whoever gathered these books had excellent taste." A sad smile touched his lips. "She would have been pleased to hear you say so. Most of these were her choices." He pulled one book from a shelf, a volume of poetry. He opened it and stared at the pages without really seeing them. She had a remarkable mind. She loved learning for its own sake. The silence stretched between them. Clara felt she should say something comforting but could not find the words. Lord Ashworth closed the book and returned it to its place. "You lost family in the flood," he said. It was not quite a question. Clara nodded. "My aunt and uncle, my lord, they raised me after my parents died." He turned to look at her fully. "And now you find yourself alone in the world, starting again with nothing." There was understanding in his voice. Not pity. Understanding. "Yes, my lord," Clara said softly. He studied her face for a moment. "Mrs. Henshaw tells me you read and write well, that you have a careful hand and an organized mind." Clara felt her cheeks warm. "I do my best, my lord." He nodded. "I am glad you are here. This room needed someone who would care for it properly, someone who would understand what it meant to my wife." He moved toward the door, then paused. "If you need anything to help with the work, ask Mrs. Henshaw and Clara." She looked up, startled that he knew her name. "Thank you," he said quietly. Then he was gone. Clara stood very still for a long moment after he left. Her hands trembled slightly. Something about the encounter had shaken her. Maybe it was the way he had spoken about his wife with such raw grief, or the way he had looked at Clara like he actually saw her. Not just a servant, not just another survivor of tragedy, but a person who understood loss. She returned to her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to his sad grey eyes. The days fell into a rhythm. Clara woke at dawn, and dressed in the plain grey dress all the house servants wore. She ate a quick breakfast in the servants' hall. Then she climbed the stairs to the library and worked until evening. The other servants were friendly but busy with their own tasks. Clara did not mind the solitude. The quiet library felt like a refuge, a place where grief and memories could exist without overwhelming her. She saw Lord Ashworth only occasionally. He would appear in the library doorway and watch her work for a few minutes without speaking. Sometimes he would comment on a book she was cataloguing. "Ah, her favorite novel," he might say, or, "She laughed so hard at that one I thought she would wake the whole house." Clara learned to simply nod and listen. She understood he needed to share these small memories with someone, that he was keeping his wife alive in the only way he could. One afternoon, 3 weeks after her arrival, Clara was high on a ladder, reaching for a book on the top shelf, when her foot slipped. She grabbed for the shelf, but her fingers found only air. She braced for the fall, but strong hands caught her waist and steadied her. She gasped and looked down. Lord Ashworth stood directly behind the ladder, his hands firm on her sides. "Careful," he said. His voice sounded strained. Clara's heart hammered in her chest, not from the near fall, from the unexpected touch, from his closeness. "Thank you, my lord," she managed to say. He helped her down the ladder, his hands steady until her feet touched the floor. Then he stepped back quickly as though burned. Clara saw color rise in his cheeks. "You should not climb so high alone," he said, his tone more formal than before. "Ask one of the footmen to assist you." Clara nodded, unable to speak. Her waist still felt warm where his hands had been. He turned and left the room without another word. That night, Clara lay in bed and thought about the moment on the ladder, about the strength in his hands, the concern in his eyes. She told herself not to be foolish. He was an earl. She was a servant. Less than a servant. She was a refugee dependent on his charity. He had saved her from falling just as any decent person would have done. It meant nothing. But her heart beat faster at the memory anyway. The next morning, Lord Ashworth sent word through Mrs. Henshaw that Clara was to join him for tea in the library that afternoon. Clara spent the morning in anxious confusion. Had she done something wrong? Was he displeased with her work? Mrs. Henshaw offered no explanations. His lordship wishes to discuss the cataloguing progress. Nothing to fret about. But Clara fretted anyway. She changed her apron twice and tried to smooth her unruly hair into something presentable. When she entered the library at 4 o'clock, Lord Ashworth was already there. He stood by the window looking out at the gardens. A tea service sat on one of the newly cleared tables. 2 cups. Clara's nervousness increased. He turned when he heard her. "Clara, thank you for coming. Please sit." He gestured to one of the chairs. Clara sat carefully on the edge of the seat, her back straight, her hands folded. Lord Ashworth poured tea for both of them. The domestic gesture seemed strange coming from an earl. "I wanted to discuss your work," he began. Clara's stomach tightened. "Of course, my lord. If there is something I am doing wrong." He held up a hand. "Quite the opposite. You have made remarkable progress. The room looks better than it has in years." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I also wanted to apologize for yesterday, for touching you so familiarly. It was not appropriate." Clara felt her face grow hot. "You saved me from a fall, my lord. There is nothing to apologize for. He met her eyes. Nevertheless, you are under my protection here, under my roof. I would not have you feel uncomfortable or afraid. Clara was surprised by his consideration. Most men of his station would not have given a second thought to touching a servant. I am not afraid, my lord, she said honestly. You have shown me nothing but kindness. Something shifted in his expression. Softened. You have had little enough of that in your life, I think. Kindness. Clara looked down at her teacup. He was right, though she had not quite realized it until he said it aloud. Tell me about yourself, he said. Not the sad parts. The parts before. What did you love to do? Clara was startled by the question. No one had asked her about herself in years. She thought for a moment. I love to read, she said finally. My mother had a small collection of books. I read them over and over until I had them memorized. I loved stories about brave people and faraway places. Lord Ashworth smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. Then you are in the right place. This room holds thousands of stories. You may read anything you like in your free time. Clara looked up at him in wonder. Truly, my lord? He nodded. Books are meant to be read, not locked away and forgotten. My wife believed that knowledge should be shared freely. I think she would have liked you. The compliment made Clara's throat tight. I wish I could have met her, my lord. She sounds like a remarkable woman. Sadness crossed his face again. She was. She had a generous heart and a curious mind. Losing her, he stopped and looked away. Forgive me. I should not burden you with my grief. It is not a burden, my lord, Clara said softly. Grief shared is grief lessened, or so my mother used to say. He looked at her with something like gratitude. Your mother was wise. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, drinking their tea. Then Lord Ashworth said, I have been thinking, the cataloguing will go faster if you have proper help. I will have one of the footmen assist you with the heavy work and high shelves. And I think you should take your meals in here, rather than running down to the servants' hall. It will save time and... He hesitated. The room feels less empty when someone is in it. Clara understood. He was asking her to bring life back to this space his wife had loved. To make it warm again, instead of a shrine to loss. I would be honored, my lord, she said. And she meant it. They spoke for a while longer about books and organization. Lord Ashworth had ideas about how the collection should be arranged. Clara listened and offered suggestions of her own. He treated her opinions with respect, asked her thoughts, considered her ideas seriously. By the time she returned to work, Clara felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt valued. The weeks that followed brought subtle changes. Lord Ashworth visited the library more often. Sometimes he would work at the desk while Clara organized books. They would talk occasionally, light conversations about literature or the weather. Sometimes they worked in silence, each focused on their own tasks, but it was a comfortable silence. The kind that exists between people who are at ease with each other. Clara noticed he looked less tired, less grey, as though having someone in his late wife's favorite room brought him peace rather than pain. The servants began to notice too. Clara heard whispers in the hallways, saw curious glances. Martha mentioned at dinner one evening that the master seemed different, more like his old self, she said. Before the tragedy, he smiled at me this morning, first time in a year, the other servants agreed. There was hope in their voices. They loved their master and wanted to see him happy again. Clara said nothing but felt a warm glow in her chest. Maybe she was helping him heal, even in some small way. One rainy afternoon, Clara was reading through a book to check its condition when she came across a pressed flower between the pages. A rose, dried and fragile, A slip of paper with it read, "From the garden, June 1847, the day we knew." Clara's eyes stung with tears. This must have been important to his wife. A memory of love, preserved. She carefully closed the book and set it aside. She would give it to Lord Ashworth later. Some treasures should not stay hidden on shelves. When Lord Ashworth arrived that evening, Clara handed him the book silently. He opened it and saw the flower. His hand shook slightly. "This was the day I asked her to marry me," he said, his voice rough. "She said yes in the rose garden. It was the happiest day of my life." He closed the book carefully and held it against his chest. "Thank you for finding this, for bringing it to me." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. He looked at her with such open emotion that her breath caught. "You have given me back more than just an organized library, Clara. You have helped me remember the joy alongside the sorrow." Something passed between them in that moment. Something warm and electric. Clara felt it in her bones, saw it reflected in his eyes. Then he looked away, clearing his throat. "Well, I should let you return to your work." But he did not move. Neither did Clara. They stood there in the fading light, surrounded by books and memories. Finally, Lord Ashworth stepped back. "Good night, Clara." His voice was soft, almost tender. "Good night, my lord," she whispered. After he left, Clara pressed her hand to her chest, where her heart was racing. She knew she was in dangerous territory. She was beginning to care for him far more than was wise or proper. The following week brought the first real signs of spring. Flowers bloomed in the gardens. Birds sang in the morning. The air grew warmer and sweeter. Clara found herself standing by the library windows more often, looking out at the beauty. Lord Ashworth caught her there one day. "Would you like to walk in the garden?" he asked. "You have been working so hard. You deserve some fresh air." Clara hesitated. "Is that proper, my lord?" A smile tugged at his lips. "I am an earl in mourning, isolated on my country estate. You are a young woman living under my roof. We are already quite improper by society's standards. A walk in the garden will hardly make it worse." So they walked. The garden paths were gravel-lined with hedges and flower beds. Spring roses were just beginning to open. Lord Ashworth showed her where his wife had planted different flowers, where their son had played. He spoke about them more easily now, with warmth instead of only grief. Clara listened and occasionally shared small memories of her own. Her mother teaching her to read, her father's laugh, small precious things she had almost forgotten. "Do you miss your village?" Lord Ashworth asked, as they paused by a fountain. Clara considered the question. "I miss what it was. The familiar streets, knowing everyone's names, but I do not miss my life there. My aunt and uncle were not kind. I was alone even when surrounded by people." She looked up at him. "Here, I feel less alone, even though I have lost everything." He held her gaze. "I understand that feeling. Loss can strip away the unnecessary and leave only what truly matters." "And what truly matters, my lord?" Clara asked softly. He seemed to struggle with his answer. "Connection, purpose, feeling that your life has meaning to someone." His voice dropped lower. "You have given me that again, Clara. I do not know if you realize it, but you have." Clara's heart swelled. "You have given me the same, my lord. You saved me from despair, gave me not just shelter, but dignity, a way to be useful. You saw me when others only saw another burden." They stood close together by the fountain. So close Clara could see the gold flecks in his grey eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from him. He reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she wished. When she did not move, he touched her cheek with gentle fingers. You are not a burden, Clara Winters. You are—" He stopped himself, dropped his hand, stepped back. "Forgive me. That was too familiar." Clara felt cold where his warmth had been. "No," she said before she could stop herself. "It was not." He stared at her. "Clara, I am your employer. You depend on me for food and shelter. I cannot. I should not." But his eyes said something different than his words. "I do not feel dependent, my lord," Clara said, her voice stronger now. "I feel grateful and safe, and something more that I should not say." His breath caught. "What more?" he asked hoarsely. Clara knew she was risking everything, her position, her security. But she also knew she could not lie. Not to him. Not about this. "I feel seen," she whispered. "I feel valued. I feel cared for." She took a shaky breath. "And I care for you in return, more than is wise, more than is proper. But I cannot help it." Lord Ashworth closed his eyes as though in pain. "I am still in mourning. I still love my wife. I will always love her." Clara nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I know, my lord. I do not ask you to forget her. I would never ask that." He opened his eyes and looked at her with such longing, it made her ache. "But I find myself thinking of you constantly, looking for excuses to be near you. You make me feel alive again, Clara, and I am terrified of what that means." Before Clara could respond, voices echoed from the house. Lord Ashworth stepped back quickly, putting proper distance between them. A footman appeared on the path. "My lord, you have visitors. Lady Margaret and her daughters have arrived unexpectedly." Lord Ashworth's jaw tightened. "Thank you. Tell them I will be there shortly." The footman bowed and left. Lord Ashworth turned to Clara. "I am sorry. We will speak more later." But his expression had closed off. The walls were back up. Clara curtsied. "Of course, my lord." She walked back to the house alone, her heart racing and her mind in turmoil. Lady Margaret was Lord Ashworth's late wife's sister. Clara learned this from Martha that evening. "She has been pushing him to remarry," Martha whispered over dinner. "Brought her 2 daughters around several times now, both pretty and well-bred. She thinks the mourning period has gone on long enough." Clara felt sick. Of course, an earl could not remain alone forever. He needed an heir, a proper wife from his own class, not a servant girl from a destroyed village who had nothing to offer but a grateful heart. For 2 days, Lady Margaret and her daughters stayed at the manor. Clara saw them from the windows. Elegant women in expensive dresses. They laughed prettily and walked with Lord Ashworth in the gardens. Clara threw herself into her work and tried not to think about what was happening. But at night, alone in her small room, she let herself cry. She had been foolish, so foolish. She had let herself imagine something that could never be. On the 3rd day, Lord Ashworth appeared in the library. He looked exhausted. "Clara, I need to speak with you." She set down her work and waited, her heart heavy. He ran his hand through his hair. "Lady Margaret is insisting I consider remarrying. She has expectations, plans." He laughed bitterly. "She has picked out which of her daughters would be the better match, as though I am shopping for a new horse." Clara said nothing. What could she say? "I am expected to choose duty over—" He stopped, looked at her with anguished eyes. "Over what I truly want." "What do you truly want, my lord?" Clara asked, though she was afraid of the answer. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stood before her. "You," he said raggedly. "I want you. I want to hear your voice every day. I want to share my thoughts with you. I want to walk in the gardens and sit by the fire and grow old, knowing you are near. But I cannot have you. Society would never accept it. My family would be scandalized. You would be ruined. Clara reached up and touched his face, her hand trembling. I am already ruined, my lord. The flood took everything I was, everything I could have been. All I have left is this moment, this truth between us. I love you. I love your kindness and your broken heart. I love how you still grieve your wife with such devotion. I love your respect for knowledge and your care for those less fortunate. I love you completely, and if that ruins me further, so be it. He caught her hand and pressed his lips to her palm. I love you too. God help me, I do. You brought light back into my darkness. You made me remember how to feel something other than pain. When I am with you, I can breathe again. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. Clara melted into his embrace. They stood together in the quiet library, holding each other like drowning people who had finally found solid ground. What do we do now? Clara whispered against his chest. She could hear his heart beating fast and hard. I do not know, he admitted. But I know I cannot give you up. I will not choose duty over love. Not again. Not when I have been given a second chance at happiness. He pulled back enough to look into her face. Clara Winters, you have no family, no fortune, no position in society. You have nothing the world values. He smiled. And yet you are everything I need, everything I want. Will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Clara could not speak, could not breathe. Tears poured down her face. You cannot mean that. The scandal, he pressed his finger gently to her lips, will pass. Let them talk. Let them disapprove. I have spent a year dying slowly in this house. You made me remember how to live. That is worth any price. He got down on one knee before her, still holding her hand. Say yes, Clara. Say you will marry me and spend your life helping me become the man I should be, the man you make me want to be. Yes, Clara sobbed. Yes. Of course yes. I love you so much. He stood and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around. Then he set her down and kissed her. His lips were soft and warm and tasted of tea and hope. Clara kissed him back with all the love and joy that had been building in her heart. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling through tears. The library, Lord Ashworth said with a wondering laugh. We declared our love in the library. My late wife would have approved, I think. She always believed this was a room for miracles. But the happiness was short-lived. That evening, Lady Margaret confronted Lord Ashworth in his study. Her voice carried into the hallway where Clara happened to be passing. You cannot be serious. A servant girl? A nobody from the flood? Lady Margaret's voice was sharp with outrage. Have you lost your mind? The scandal will destroy you. Lord Ashworth's voice was calm but firm. I am quite sane, Margaret, and I am not seeking your approval. What would Eleanor think? Lady Margaret demanded. Would she want you throwing away your position for a common girl? Clara heard Lord Ashworth stand, his chair scraping. Do not presume to speak for my late wife. Eleanor believed in love above all else. She would want me to be happy, and Clara makes me happy. Lady Margaret made a disgusted sound. That girl has bewitched you. She saw a wealthy lord and decided to trap you. Can you not see it? She has nothing. She is nothing. That is enough. Lord Ashworth's voice thundered through the door. Clara is worth 10 of most people I know. She is kind and intelligent and honest. She expects nothing from me. If anything, I am the one who has trapped her by falling in love when she has no power to refuse. His voice dropped, but Clara could still hear it. She lost everything in that flood. Her family, her home, her entire world. And yet she found the strength to begin again, to work hard, to bring joy to others, despite her own grief. That is courage, Margaret. Real courage, not the shallow bravery of people who have never truly suffered. There was silence. Then Lady Margaret spoke again, her voice cold. If you do this, you will be cut from proper society. My daughters will withdraw their attentions. Your name will be tarnished. Lord Ashworth laughed. Good. I never wanted your daughter's attentions, and society's good opinion means nothing if I am miserable. Now please gather your things. Your carriage will be ready within the hour. Clara hurried away before they could catch her listening. Her heart soared and ached at once. He had defended her, chosen her, but at such cost. That night Clara could not sleep. She kept thinking about what Lady Margaret had said, about scandal and ruin. Lord Ashworth had suffered so much already. Did she have the right to bring more trouble to his life? Maybe she should leave, disappear before the wedding could happen, save him from himself. But the thought of leaving him made her physically ill. She loved him too much, needed him too much. Was that selfish? She did not know anymore. In the morning, she found a note slipped under her door. Meet me in the garden, J. She had never known his first name was J. James, perhaps, or John. She dressed quickly and slipped outside. The sun was just rising, painting everything gold and pink. Lord Ashworth waited by the fountain where they had first declared their feelings. He looked serious but determined. You heard last night, he said. It was not a question. Clara nodded. I am sorry you had to hear those things. She was not entirely wrong, Clara said quietly. I have nothing to offer you. No connections, no dowry, no. He pulled her close. You have everything to offer me. You have yourself. That is all I want. All I need. He tilted her chin up. Are you having second thoughts? Because if you are, tell me now. I will not force you into this. Clara shook her head. No second thoughts, only fears. Fears that I am being selfish, that I am ruining you. You are saving me, he corrected gently. Clara, I was a ghost before you came. I went through the motions of living, but felt nothing. You woke me up, made me remember that life can be beautiful even after terrible loss. That is not ruin. That is redemption. He kissed her forehead. We will face the scandal together. We will face everything together, and we will be happy despite what anyone says. Do you believe me? Clara looked up into his grey eyes and saw only truth, only love. I believe you, she whispered. They married quietly 3 weeks later in the small chapel on the estate. Only the household servants attended. Mrs. Henshaw cried through the entire ceremony. Martha squeezed Clara's hand beforehand and said, Your mother would be so proud. Clara wore a simple white dress that Lord Ashworth, James, she could call him James now, had ordered specially made for her. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever owned. James wore black still in honor of his late wife, but his eyes shone with happiness as Clara walked toward him. The vicar seemed uncomfortable with the unusual match, but performed the ceremony properly. Clara's hands shook as James slipped the ring onto her finger. It was gold with a small emerald. Green like the hills around your old village, he whispered. So you never forget where you came from. Clara's eyes filled with tears. How had she found someone who understood her so completely? They spoke their vows in steady voices. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, James kissed her softly. Hello, Lady Ashworth, he murmured against her lips. Clara laughed through her tears. Hello, husband. The scandal was every bit as bad as Lady Margaret had predicted. Within a week, the news had spread through the county. An earl marrying a flood refugee, a servant girl elevated to nobility overnight. The gossip was vicious. Clara heard whispers when she went into the village with Mrs. Henshaw. She saw people turn away when she approached. Letters arrived from distant relatives of James's, expressing shock and disappointment. His solicitor came personally to warn about potential challenges to the marriage's validity. James ignored it all. "They will tire of it eventually," he said. "Some new scandal will capture their attention and we will be forgotten." But Clara found it harder to ignore than James did. She had known judgment all her life, had been told repeatedly that she was less than others. The scandal brought all those old wounds back to the surface. She began to doubt again, to wonder if she truly belonged in this new life. James found her crying in the library one afternoon. "What has happened?" he asked urgently, kneeling beside her chair. Clara shook her head. "Nothing. Everything. I heard 2 women in the village talking. They said such cruel things. Said I was a fortune hunter. Said you married me out of pity or baser reasons. Said I had trapped you." James's face hardened. "Who said this? Tell me their names." But Clara grabbed his hands. "It does not matter. They are right in a way. You did marry beneath you. I do not know how to be a lady. I do not know the rules or the manners," or James cupped her face. "Stop. Listen to me. You are my wife, my partner, my equal in every way that matters. Do you think I care about rules and manners? My first wife was a lady from birth, and she was the kindest, most genuine person I knew, precisely because she did not let society's rules dictate her heart. I married you because I love you, because you make me happy, because I cannot imagine my life without you. That is all that matters." Clara wanted to believe him, but the doubts whispered in her mind at night. "You do not belong. You never will. He will regret this." One evening, James's cousin arrived unexpectedly. Lord Edmund was a pompous man who clearly thought highly of himself. He took one look at Clara, and his lip curled. "So this is the girl who has caused such a stir." James stiffened. "This is my wife. You will address her with respect." Lord Edmund laughed. "Respect? For a servant girl playing dress-up? Really, James, you have embarrassed the entire family. The least you could do is keep her hidden away. Do not parade her around as though she were actually a lady." Clara felt each word like a physical blow. But before James could respond, she stood. Her voice was cold and steady. "You are right, Lord Edmund. I was a servant. I was also a survivor of a flood that killed everyone I knew. I lost everything and had to start over with nothing but my own strength. I have worked hard every day of my life. I have learned to read and write and think for myself. I married your cousin because we love each other, and I will not hide or apologize for that love." She looked him directly in the eye. "You may think me beneath you, but at least I have the courage to be exactly who I am. Can you say the same?" Lord Edmund spluttered, his face red. James stood beside Clara, pride evident in his expression. "I think you should leave now, Edmund, and do not return until you can treat my wife with the courtesy she deserves." Lord Edmund left in a fury. After he was gone, James pulled Clara into his arms. "That was magnificent," he said, laughter in his voice. "You faced him down like a queen." Clara felt shaky, but also strong. "I am tired of apologizing for existing, for being happy, for loving you." James kissed her deeply. "Then do not apologize ever again. We will build our own happiness, and let the rest of the world think what they will." That moment marked a change in Clara. She stopped trying to fit into a world that did not want her. Instead, she and James created their own world. They spent their days together, reading in the library and walking in the gardens. They hosted no grand parties, but invited the estate workers to small dinners. Clara got to know all the servants by name. She helped in the kitchen sometimes, much to the cook's surprise and delight. She read to the children of the estate workers on Sunday afternoons. Slowly, the people of the estate came to love her, to see her as a real person rather than a scandal. James began to smile more, to laugh freely. The grief that had shadowed him began to lift. He still honored his late wife's memory. They would visit her grave together and place flowers. James would tell Clara stories about Eleanor, and Clara would listen without jealousy. She understood that love does not diminish love, that honoring the past does not mean forgetting to live in the present. "Eleanor would have liked you," James said one day as they stood by the grave. "She always said love is not a finite resource, that the heart expands to hold all the love we allow in. I believe she is happy for us, wherever she is." Spring turned to summer. The gardens bloomed in brilliant colors. Clara learned to ride a horse, though she was never very good at it. James found it endearing when she shrieked and clutched the reins too tightly. They rode slowly through the countryside together, exploring the lands. Clara saw beauty everywhere, in the rolling hills, in the sheep dotting the pastures, in the small villages they passed. She thought of her own village sometimes, of what had been lost, but she also saw what had been found. A new life, a new love, a second chance at happiness. One afternoon, they returned from a ride to find the vicar waiting. He looked uncomfortable. "My lord, my lady, I am sorry to come unannounced, but there is a situation." James tensed. "What situation?" The vicar cleared his throat. "Lady Margaret has filed a complaint with the bishop. She claims the marriage is invalid due to improper circumstances. She is demanding an investigation." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. James exploded. "This is outrageous. The marriage is entirely legal. Clara and I are both of age and entered into it willingly." "What grounds?" "She claims coercion, my lord," the vicar said miserably. "She says Miss Winters, forgive me, Lady Ashworth, was dependent on your charity and could not truly give free consent." James paced like a caged animal. "That is absurd. Clara, tell him. Were you coerced?" Clara found her voice, though it shook. "No, never. I love my husband. I married him freely and gladly." The vicar nodded. "I believe you, my lady, but the bishop must investigate. It is required. I am sorry." After the vicar left, Clara and James sat together in the library. The room that had brought them together now felt like a sanctuary under siege. "This is my fault," Clara said. "If I had refused you, if I had left when I had the chance." James grabbed her shoulders. "Do not say that. Do not even think it. We have done nothing wrong. We fell in love. We married. That is all." But Clara could see the worry in his eyes. "What happens if the bishop rules against us?" she asked. James's jaw set. "Then we will fight it. We will take it to every court in England if we must. I will not lose you, Clara. I will not." The investigation took weeks. The bishop sent representatives to interview them separately, to question the servants, to examine every detail of their courtship and marriage. It was humiliating and frightening. Clara had to recount her entire history, her parents' deaths, her aunt and uncle's treatment, the flood, her arrival at Ashworth Manor. Each telling felt like reopening old wounds. James endured his own interrogations with barely controlled rage, but he remained calm for Clara's sake. "We will get through this," he promised every night. Together, the servants rallied around them. Mrs. Henshaw gave a fierce testimony about Clara's character and work ethic. Martha told them about Clara's kindness and gentle nature. Even the stable boy spoke up about how Lady Ashworth always remembered to bring apples for the horses. The outpouring of support gave Clara strength. These people saw her, valued her, believed in her. That mattered more than any title or society's approval. Finally, after 6 agonizing weeks, the bishop's ruling arrived. James opened the letter with shaking hands. Clara stood beside him holding her breath. James read it once, then again. Then he let out a shout of joy and lifted Clara off her feet. It is over. The marriage is declared valid. They found no evidence of coercion or impropriety. Clara burst into tears of relief. James spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at once. "We won, Clara. We won." That evening, they hosted a celebration dinner for all the household staff. The dining room filled with laughter and music. James gave a toast. "To my wife, who has endured slander and investigation with grace and courage, to the friends who stood by us, and to the truth, which always prevails in the end." Everyone cheered. Clara felt happiness bubble up in her chest like champagne. This was family. Not the family she was born into, but the family she had chosen, and who had chosen her back. Later, alone in their chambers, James held Clara close. "I was so afraid," he admitted. "Afraid they would take you from me, that I would lose you the way I lost Eleanor and Thomas." Clara kissed him softly. "You will never lose me. I promise. We have fought too hard for this love to ever let it go." James smiled against her lips. "Have I told you today that I love you?" Clara pretended to think. "Perhaps, but I would not mind hearing it again." He laughed and pulled her closer. "I love you, Clara Ashworth. My brave, beautiful, extraordinary wife. I will love you every day for the rest of our lives." Autumn came to Ashworth Manor in a blaze of gold and red. Clara walked through the gardens and marveled at how much had changed in 1 year. Last autumn, she had been living with her aunt and uncle, believing herself worthless, believing she would never be loved. Then the flood had come and destroyed everything. But from that destruction had come new life, new hope, a new beginning. She never could have imagined. She was no longer the broken girl who had sat on a muddy hill watching her world wash away. She was Lady Clara Ashworth, wife, friend, a woman who had found her place in the world through the most unexpected path. She had learned that tragedy can lead to transformation, that loss can make room for love, that sometimes you have to let go of everything you were to become who you were meant to be. James found her by the rose bushes, the same roses where he had proposed to his first wife so many years ago. He wrapped his arms around her from behind and rested his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Clara leaned back against him. "About how strange life is, how one terrible day led to this beautiful one, how losing everything helped me find what truly matters." "And what truly matters?" James asked, though he knew the answer. Clara turned in his arms to face him. "Love, courage, being seen for who you really are, having someone believe in you even when you cannot believe in yourself." She touched his face tenderly. "You gave me all of that. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I was broken. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You saved me, James." He shook his head. "We saved each other. I was drowning in grief. You pulled me back to shore. You reminded me that life can be good again, that loving again does not mean betraying what came before. You gave me permission to be happy." He kissed her forehead. "So thank you, my love. Thank you for surviving, for coming to my door that day, for organizing my library and stealing my heart in the process." Clara laughed. "I never meant to steal anything." James grinned. "The best thieves never do." They walked back to the house, hand in hand. Inside, a fire crackled in the library. Books lined the walls in perfect order. Clara's work, Clara's gift. James pulled her down onto the settee beside him. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance. Outside, the first leaves of autumn drifted past the windows. Change was constant. Loss was inevitable. But so was renewal. So was hope. "Do you ever miss your old life?" James asked quietly. Clara considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss my parents, the feeling of being young and safe. But I do not miss who I was becoming before the flood. Small and scared and certain I was worthless. That girl is gone." She looked at her husband. "The flood destroyed everything, but in a way it set me free. Free to become this person. The one who is brave enough to love you, strong enough to face scandal, confident enough to know my own worth." James kissed her hand. "I am grateful for your strength, your courage. I am grateful that from all the terrible things that happened, we found each other." Clara smiled. "The grieving count who gave me shelter." James raised an eyebrow. "Is that how you think of me?" Clara laughed. "That is how we began. But now you are so much more. You are my husband, my partner, my best friend, my home." Tears shimmered in James's eyes. "And you are mine, my second chance, my unexpected miracle, my proof that love can bloom even in the darkest seasons." They stayed in the library until the fire burned low. Then they climbed the stairs to their chambers, to the bed they shared, to the life they had built together from the ruins of what had been before. Clara lay in her husband's arms and thought about the girl on the muddy hillside a year ago. How lost she had been, how certain that her life was over. She wished she could go back and tell that girl the truth. "Your life is not over. It is about to begin. The flood will take everything, but a kind man with a broken heart will give you shelter, and in time, that shelter will become home. That kindness will become love, and you will learn that sometimes the worst day of your life is the first step toward the best days you have ever known." "I love you," Clara whispered into the darkness. James pulled her closer. "I love you too, forever." And in that moment, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The flood had destroyed her village, but it had brought her to this, to him, to a love that was worth every loss, worth every struggle, worth everything. She closed her eyes and let herself fall asleep, safe and cherished and home at last.